The sun was starting to set over the small town of Riverdale. Officer Mike Bennett drove his police car slowly down the winding country road that cut through Blackwood Forest. The tall trees cast long shadows across the road. It was Friday evening, and Mike was finishing his shift. He had been a police officer for 12 years in this quiet town, where not much happened. Mike rolled down his window and breathed in the fresh spring air. The radio played softly in the background. He was thinking about getting home to his wife and daughter. They were planning to watch a movie together. His daughter had picked a cartoon about talking animals. Mike smiled at the thought. The road was empty except for his police car. Most people in Riverdale stayed away from this stretch of road after dark. There were stories about strange noises in the woods at night. Mike didn't believe these tales, but many locals did. He checked his watch. Only 30 more minutes until his shift ended. Mike decided to drive one more time around the forest edge before heading back to the station. As he turned a corner, his headlights swept across the dark trees. Nothing seemed out of place. Mike reached for his coffee cup, taking a quick sip of the now cold liquid. His radio crackled with a message from the station, asking about his location. He picked up the receiver to respond. "This is Officer Bennett. I'm on Forest Road, making my final round before." A sudden movement caught his eye. Mike slammed on the brakes, causing the car to skid slightly. His coffee spilled onto the passenger seat. At first, he thought it might be a deer crossing the road, but what he saw made him sit up straight. A small figure emerged from the trees. It was a boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old. His clothes were dirty and torn. Even from a distance, Mike could see that the child was shaking. The boy waved his arms frantically, trying to get Mike's attention. "Dispatch, I've got a situation here. A child just came out of the woods. I'm stopping to check it out," Mike said into the radio. "Copy that. Do you need backup?" the dispatcher asked. "Stand by. Let me assess the situation first." Mike parked the car and turned on his emergency lights. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out cautiously. In his years on the force, he had learned that even simple situations could turn dangerous quickly. "Hey there," Mike called out, keeping his voice calm and friendly. "Are you okay?" The boy ran toward him, stumbling twice on the uneven ground. As he got closer, Mike could see tears streaming down his dirty face. There were scratches on his arms and a bruise forming on his cheek. "Help," the boy gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "Please help them." Mike knelt down to the boy's level. "Slow down, buddy. What's your name? Where are your parents?" The boy's eyes were wide with fear. "My name is Jamie. They're still back there. In the old cabin. The men with guns. They're going to hurt them." Mike felt a chill run down his spine. "Who's in the cabin, Jamie? Who has guns?" "My mom and dad and little sister," Jamie said, his voice breaking. "We were camping when these men came. They took us to this cabin. I escaped through a window, but they're still there." Mike's blood ran cold. What the boy was describing sounded like a kidnapping situation with armed suspects. He needed to get more information while calling for backup. "How many men are there, Jamie? And how long have you been running through the woods?" As Jamie began to answer, Mike realized this quiet Friday night was about to become the most dangerous shift of his career. Jamie shivered as Officer Bennett wrapped a blanket around his small shoulders. They sat in the back of the police car with the heater running. The boy's teeth chattered, but Mike couldn't tell if it was from cold or fear. "There are 3 men," Jamie said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They have big guns. They took our phones and tied up my parents." Mike handed Jamie a water bottle from his lunchbox. The boy drank quickly, spilling some down his chin. "I've been running for a long time," Jamie continued. "Maybe 2 hours. I got lost a few times, but I kept going downhill like my dad taught me. He said roads are usually at the bottom of hills." Mike nodded, impressed by the boy's resourcefulness. "You did the right thing, Jamie. You're very brave." While Jamie sipped more water, Mike stepped outside the car to radio for backup. He kept his voice low, though the boy could still see him through the window. "Dispatch, this is Officer Bennett. I need immediate backup on Forest Road, near mile marker 16. Possible kidnapping situation with multiple armed suspects. I have one child who escaped, says his family is being held at a cabin in the woods." "Copy that, Officer Bennett. All available units are being dispatched to your location. SWAT team has been notified." Mike returned to the car where Jamie was now breathing more steadily. "Help is coming, buddy. Can you tell me more about this cabin? How far is it from the road? Jamie closed his eyes, trying to remember. It's old and made of dark wood. There's a broken truck outside. The windows have bars on them. I think it's far from the road, but I'm not sure. Did you hear the men talk about why they took your family? Jamie nodded slowly. They kept asking my dad about a key and some papers. Dad kept saying he didn't know what they were talking about. Mike's mind raced. This sounded like something bigger than a random kidnapping. He pulled out a small notebook and a map of the area. Jamie, can you help me find where this cabin might be? It would help us rescue your family faster. The boy leaned forward, studying the map. His small finger traced along the paper, following the winding path of the forest. We were camping here. He pointed to a spot near the river. And I think the cabin is somewhere around here. His finger moved to an area with no market trails. Mike circled the location. Just then, 2 police cars arrived, their lights flashing in the darkness. Officer Sarah Chen and Officer Tom Rodriguez approached Mike's car. "What's the situation?" Chen asked quietly. Mike briefed them quickly while Jamie watched through the window, his eyes wide with worry. "The boy says there are 3 armed men holding his family in a cabin somewhere in this area." Mike pointed to the map. "We need to move fast, but carefully." Rodriguez nodded. "SWAT is 15 minutes out." "That might be too long," Mike said, looking back at Jamie. "If these men realize the boy is missing, they might panic." Just then, Jamie tapped on the window frantically. Mike opened the door. "I just remembered something," Jamie said, his voice shaking with urgency. "Before I escaped, I heard one of the men say they need to finish this tonight and move them before sunrise." "What does that mean?" The 3 officers exchanged alarmed glances. This changed everything. They couldn't wait for SWAT. "Chen, stay with the boy. Rodriguez, call in our position and have medical standing by. I'm going to see if Jamie can guide us closer to the cabin without putting him in danger." As more police cars arrived, lighting up the dark forest road with their flashing lights, Mike knelt down to Jamie's level again. "Jamie, I promise we're going to save your family, but I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that?" The boy wiped his eyes and nodded, his young face showing determination beyond his years. "I can be brave," he said. "Just like my dad told me to be." #. The police set up a command center on Forest Road. 4 police cars were parked in a circle, their headlights pointing outward into the dark woods. Officer Chen sat with Jamie in her car, giving him hot chocolate from her thermos. The boy had stopped shaking, but his eyes kept darting to the forest edge. Chief Wilson arrived and gathered the officers around the hood of his car. A large map was spread out, with Jamie's marked location circled in red. "Based on the boy's description, we believe the cabin is somewhere in this area," Mike explained, pointing to a section of dense forest. "It's about 3 miles from here, no roads leading to it." Chief Wilson frowned. "That's private property owned by the Anderson family. As far as I know, there shouldn't be any cabins there." Jamie was very clear about what he saw. Mike insisted. "Old wooden cabin, broken truck outside, barred windows." The chief nodded slowly. "I believe him. That description matches an old hunting lodge that was abandoned years ago. The Andersons probably don't even know it's there." Officer Rodriguez returned from his car with a tablet. "I pulled up satellite images. There's definitely something in that clearing." He zoomed in on a small structure barely visible through the tree cover. "SWAT is still 20 minutes out," Chief Wilson said. "But if these men are planning to move the hostages before dawn, we need to act now." Mike stepped forward. "I know these woods, sir. I used to hunt here as a teenager. I can leave a small team to get eyes on the cabin." The chief considered this for a moment. "Take Rodriguez and Johnson. Get close enough to confirm the situation, but do not engage unless the family is in immediate danger. We'll have the rest of the team ready to move in on your signal." Mike nodded and went to his car to get his gear. As he checked his flashlight, he felt a tug on his sleeve. Jamie had slipped away from Officer Chen and was standing beside him. "Are you going to get my family now?" the boy asked. Mike knelt down. "Yes, we are. But I need you to stay here where it's safe. Can you tell me one more thing that might help us? Did you hear any of the men's names?" Jamie thought hard. They called the big man with the beard Vince. And they talked about someone named Marshall who was coming in the morning. Mike's heart skipped a beat. Vince Marshall was a name known to every officer in the county, a dangerous fugitive wanted for armed robbery and assault. "Thank you, Jamie. That helps a lot." Mike guided the boy back to Officer Chen, whispered something to her, then rejoined his team. The three officers checked their weapons and radios. They wore dark jackets and carried only essential gear to move quietly. "Remember, observation only," Chief Wilson reminded them. "Radio in what you see, and we'll coordinate the full response." Mike nodded, then led his small team into the dark forest. They used dim red flashlights to avoid being spotted from a distance. The night was cold, and their breath formed small clouds in the air. After 30 minutes of careful hiking, Rodriguez held up his hand, signaling them to stop. In the distance, a faint light flickered between the trees. "There's the cabin," he whispered. They moved closer, staying low and using trees for cover. When they were about 100 yards away, they could see the full structure, exactly as Jamie had described. A battered pickup truck sat rusting beside it. Light leaked from boards covering the windows. Mike raised his binoculars. Through a crack in one boarded window, he could make out the silhouette of a large man pacing back and forth. The man was holding something that looked like a rifle. "I count 2 outside," Johnson whispered, pointing to men smoking by the truck. Mike scanned the area around the cabin. Something caught his eye, a small shed about 20 yards from the main building. The door was padlocked, but light shone through the cracks. "I think the family might be in that shed," Mike said quietly into his radio. "Chief, we have visual confirmation. At least 3 armed suspects, possibly more inside. Hostages may be in a separate structure." Just then, one of the men by the truck checked his watch and said something to his companion. They both nodded and walked toward the shed, pulling keys from a pocket. Mike felt his stomach drop. They're moving toward the shed now. They might be planning to move the hostages. "Hold position," the chief's voice crackled through the radio. "SWAT is 10 minutes out." But as Mike watched the men unlock the shed door, he knew they might not have 10 minutes. Mike watched through his binoculars as the 2 men opened the shed door. A woman's frightened face appeared in the doorway. Her hands were tied in front of her. Mike recognized her from the family photo Jamie had shown them. It was the boy's mother, Lisa Parker. "Please," they heard her beg, her voice carrying faintly through the cold night air. "My son is just a child. He's lost in the woods. Let us look for him." One of the men grabbed her arm roughly. "Your kid is probably coyote food by now. Anyway, we're moving you all. Boss's orders." Behind her, Mike could see a man and a small girl. The man's face was bruised, and he was limping as they forced him out of the shed. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was crying silently, clutching a small stuffed rabbit. "That's all of Jamie's family," Mike whispered into his radio. "Father appears injured. They're being moved now." "SWAT is still 8 minutes out," the chief responded. "Can you maintain visual without being detected?" Mike watched as the men marched the family toward a different vehicle, a large black SUV parked on the far side of the cabin. "Negative. They're loading them into a vehicle. If they drive away, we'll lose them in these woods." There was a moment of silence on the radio. Then the chief's voice came through, tense but clear. "Officer Bennett, use your judgment. If you believe the hostages are in immediate danger of being removed from the scene, you are authorized to intervene. But be careful, the safety of that family is priority 1. Mike looked at Rodriguez and Johnson. They nodded, ready to follow his lead. "We need to create a distraction," Mike said quietly. "Johnson, circle around to the east side of the clearing. Rodriguez, take the west. I'll approach from this position. On my signal, Johnson, fire 2 shots into the air. That should draw their attention away from the family." The officers split up, moving silently through the underbrush. Mike watched as the kidnappers forced Mr. Parker into the SUV. The mother and daughter were still outside, being held by one of the men while another loaded bags into the vehicle. Mike waited until Johnson was in position, then pressed his radio button twice, the signal. 5 seconds later, 2 gunshots rang out from the eastern edge of the clearing. The effect was immediate. The men by the SUV ducked down, grabbing their weapons. "Check it out," one of them yelled. 2 men ran toward the sound, leaving only 1 man guarding the mother and daughter. This was their chance. Mike sprinted from his hiding place, staying low. The remaining kidnapper hadn't seen him yet, his attention focused on the direction of the gunshots. "Police! Don't move!" Mike shouted when he was 20 feet away. The man spun around, raising his gun. Mike had no choice. He fired once, hitting the man in the shoulder. The kidnapper dropped his weapon, falling to the ground. Mrs. Parker grabbed her daughter and pulled her down behind the SUV for cover. From inside the vehicle, Mr. Parker was shouting. Rodriguez appeared from the west side of the clearing, moving quickly toward the family. "Stay down. We're police officers." But the situation was far from over. The two men who had run toward the gunshots were now returning, alerted by Mike's shout. And the cabin door burst open as a large bearded man, Vince, Mike assumed, emerged with a shotgun. "Get down," Mike yelled to Rodriguez, who was helping Mrs. Parker and her daughter. Gunfire erupted from the cabin. Mike took cover behind a tree as bullets splintered the bark near his head. Through his earpiece, he heard good news. SWAT ETA 2 minutes. Helicopter support incoming. Mike looked over at the family. Rodriguez had managed to get them behind a fallen log. The little girl was crying, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. Mrs. Parker was trying to comfort her while looking frantically at the SUV where her husband was still trapped. The night sky suddenly lit up as the police helicopter appeared, its powerful searchlight sweeping the clearing. The kidnappers, now exposed in the bright light, scattered toward the woods. Mike knew they had to reach Mr. Parker, but with bullets still flying, the next few minutes would determine whether this rescue became a success or a tragedy. The helicopter's searchlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the clearing around the cabin. The bright white circle moved across the ground, following the kidnappers as they ran for cover. Mike could hear the SWAT team approaching through the forest, the faint sound of boots rushing through underbrush and quick, hushed commands. "We need to get to Mr. Parker," Mike called to Rodriguez over the noise of the helicopter. The SUV, where Jamie's father was trapped, sat exposed in the middle of the clearing. Rodriguez nodded. "I'll cover you." Gunfire continued from the cabin. Vince and one of his men had retreated inside and were shooting from the windows. The third man was still on the ground where Mike had shot him, clutching his shoulder and groaning. Mike looked at Mrs. Parker. "Ma'am, I need you and your daughter to stay down behind this log. Don't move until we tell you it's safe." The woman nodded, her arms tight around her little girl. The child's face was buried against her mother's chest, still clutching the stuffed rabbit. "My husband," Mrs. Parker said, her voice shaking. "Please help Tom. He eats his medicine. He has a heart condition." This new information made the situation even more urgent. Mike took a deep breath and prepared to move. The SUV was about 30 yards away, a dangerous sprint under gunfire. Just then, Officer Johnson's voice came through the radio. "I've circled behind the cabin. I can see through a back window. There are only 2 men inside." The helicopter made another pass, its light temporarily blinding the shooters in the cabin. This was their chance. "Now!" Mike shouted, leaping to his feet. Rodriguez fired several shots toward the cabin windows, forcing the men to duck. Mike ran in a zigzag pattern toward the SUV, keeping low. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet, but he kept moving. When he reached the vehicle, he dropped to the ground and crawled to the passenger side door. Through the window, he could see Mr. Parker inside. The man was pale and sweating, his hands bound with zip ties. Mike pulled the door open. "Mr. Parker, I'm Officer Bennett. Your son Jamie is safe. He's the one who got help." Relief washed over the man's face. "Thank God," he whispered. "My boy made it." Mike quickly cut the zip ties with his pocket knife. "Can you move? Your wife says you need medicine." Mr. Parker nodded weakly. "In my pocket." They didn't find it. As Mr. Parker fumbled for his pills, Mike heard the SWAT team commander's voice on the radio. "All units in position around the cabin. Ready to move on your mark, Chief." Chief Wilson responded immediately. "Execute as soon as all hostages are secure." Mike helped Mr. Parker take his medicine, then assessed their situation. They were still pinned down, with about 20 yards of open ground between the SUV and the log where Mrs. Parker and her daughter were hiding. The gunfire from the cabin suddenly increased. They were running out of time. "Mr. Parker, I'm going to help you across to your family. We need to move fast. Can you run?" The man took a deep breath as his medicine began to work. "I think so. Let's go." Mike radioed Rodriguez. "We're coming across. Give us covering fire." "Ready when you are," Rodriguez replied. Mike helped Mr. Parker out of the SUV, supporting him with one arm while keeping his gun ready with the other hand. On three. 1, 2, 3. They burst into a run as Rodriguez fired rapidly at the cabin. The helicopter swung its searchlight directly into the cabin windows, momentarily blinding anyone looking out. Halfway across the clearing, Mr. Parker stumbled. Mike caught him, practically dragging him the remaining distance. They fell behind the log just as a hail of bullets hit the ground where they had been. The family reunion was emotional but brief. Mrs. Parker sobbed as she touched her husband's face. The little girl cried "Daddy," and reached for him with one arm, still unwilling to let go of her rabbit. "Jamie?" Mr. Parker asked urgently. "Is he really safe?" "Yes," Mike assured him. "He's with our officers back at the road. He's the bravest kid I've ever met." The radio crackled again. "SWAT moving in now. All officers, stand by." Mike peered over the log to see black-clad SWAT team members converging on the cabin from all sides. The standoff was about to end. The SWAT team moved like shadows around the cabin. They wore black helmets and body armor. Their guns were raised as they crept closer to the building. Mike watched from behind the log where the Parker family huddled together. "Stay down," Mike told the family. "It's almost over." The SWAT commander's voice came through Mike's radio. "All units in position. Flashbang deploying in 3, 2, 1. A blinding light erupted from the cabin windows, followed by a deafening bang. The flashbang grenade was designed to stun anyone inside without causing serious harm. Seconds later, the SWAT team stormed the cabin from all sides. There were shouts of "Police" and "Get down." Mike heard a few quick shots and silence. "Shots fired! Shots fired!" Someone called over the radio. Mike's heart raced as he waited for news. The family beside him was silent, the little girl whimpering softly against her father's chest. After what felt like hours but was really only minutes, the radio crackled again. "Building secure. 2 suspects in custody. 1 suspect down but alive. No officer injuries." Mike sighed with relief. "It's over," he told the Parkers. "The bad men are caught. You're safe now." Mrs. Parker began to cry, holding her husband and daughter tight. Mr. Parker looked at Mike with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "Our family is alive because of you and our son." Medical teams were now rushing into the clearing. EMTs hurried toward the log where Mike and the family were hiding. "This man needs medical attention," Mike told them, pointing to Mr. Parker. "He has a heart condition and may have been beaten." The EMTs quickly checked Mr. Parker's vital signs and placed him on a stretcher. Mrs. Parker and her daughter followed closely, unwilling to be separated from him again. Mike walked alongside them as they headed toward the edge of the forest where ambulances waited. Chief Wilson met them at the tree line. "Good work, Bennett," the chief said, clapping Mike on the shoulder. "The family is reunited thanks to you and your team." "Any word on why these men targeted the Parkers?" Mike asked. The chief nodded. "We found some interesting things in the cabin. Looks like Vince Marshall wasn't just a kidnapper. He was running a counterfeiting operation from that cabin. Mr. Parker is a bank manager at First National. They wanted his security codes." Mike looked at the family being loaded into the ambulance. "And they were willing to hurt a whole family for it." "Some people have no limits," the chief replied. "But thanks to that brave boy and your quick action, this story has a happy ending." Speaking of Jamie, Mike realized the boy would be worried sick about his family. "Sir, permission to go tell Jamie his family is safe?" "Granted. Take my car. It's faster." Mike drove quickly back to the command post on Forest Road. When he arrived, he found Jamie sitting in a police car with Officer Chen. The boy jumped out when he saw Mike. "Did you find them? Are they okay?" Jamie asked, his eyes wide with hope and fear. Mike knelt down to the boy's level. "Yes, Jamie. Your mom, dad, and sister are all safe. They're on their way to the hospital now, but everyone is going to be fine." Jamie's face crumpled with relief. He threw his arms around Mike's neck, sobbing. Thank you for saving them." Mike hugged the boy back, feeling the small body shake with emotion. "You're the real hero, Jamie. You saved your family by being brave enough to escape and find help." Officer Chen wiped away a tear, touched by the scene. Can I see them now? Jamie asked, pulling back from the hug. Absolutely, Mike said. I'll drive you to the hospital myself. As they walked to the car, Mike put his hand on Jamie's shoulder. You know, I've been a police officer for 12 years, and I've never met anyone as brave as you. Jamie looked up at him with a small, proud smile. My dad always says that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. Mike nodded, impressed by the wisdom. Your dad is a smart man, and he's going to be very proud of you when he sees you. They got into the police car and headed toward the hospital, leaving behind the dark forest and the nightmare it had contained. The hospital hallway was bright and busy. Nurses hurried past with clipboards while doctors spoke in hushed voices. Mike walked beside Jamie, who kept pace despite his tired legs. The boy's eyes darted from room to room, searching for his family. Are we almost there? Jamie asked for the third time. Just down this hall, Mike replied with a patient smile. The doctor wanted to check your dad's heart and make sure your mom and sister weren't hurt. They turned a corner and saw Officer Chen standing outside a room. She smiled when she spotted them. They're right in here, she said, pointing to the door. The doctors say everyone is doing well. Jamie didn't wait another second. He pushed open the door and rushed inside. Mike followed, staying near the doorway to give the family some privacy. The scene inside brought tears to Mike's eyes. Mrs. Parker was sitting on the edge of her husband's hospital bed, still holding their daughter. When she saw Jamie, she let out a cry of joy. Jamie, she exclaimed, opening her arms wide. The boy ran to his mother, who wrapped him in a tight hug. Mr. Parker reached out from his bed to touch his son's head, his face wet with tears. My brave, brave boy, Mr. Parker whispered. You saved us all. Jamie's little sister wiggled free from her mother's lap and threw her arms around her brother. Jamie, I knew you would come back. Her stuffed rabbit was squished between them. Mike watched as the family held each other, all talking at once. Their words tumbled over each other, questions about how Jamie escaped, if he was hurt, how scared they had been for him. Jamie tried to answer everything, his small voice excited and emotional. After a few minutes, Mrs. Parker looked up and noticed Mike standing by the door. She gently untangled herself from the family embrace and walked over to him. Officer Bennett, she said, taking his hands in hers. I don't know how to thank you. When those men caught us at our campsite, I thought. Her voice broke. No need for thanks, ma'am, Mike said gently. I'm just glad everyone is safe. Mr. Parker called from the bed. Please, officer, come in. We want to hear how our son found you. Mike stepped fully into the room. The hospital had given Mr. Parker a private room with a window overlooking the city. His heart monitor beat steadily beside the bed. Your son is quite remarkable, Mike said. He ran through miles of dark forest to reach the road. Then he flagged down my patrol car and clearly explained the situation. Jamie blushed at the praise but stood a little taller. The doctors want to keep your husband overnight for observation, Mike continued, addressing Mrs. Parker. But they say there's no serious damage to his heart. The rest of you are free to go home or stay here. We're staying together, Mrs. Parker said firmly. After what happened, I don't want to be apart even for one night. The hospital had already brought in a cot and a small bed for Mrs. Parker and the children. A nurse had found clean clothes for all of them, and the children had been given hot chocolate and sandwiches. Mike checked his watch. It was almost midnight. He had been on duty for over 16 hours, but he didn't feel tired. The adrenaline of the rescue was still flowing through his veins. I should let you all rest, he said. There will be an officer outside your door all night, just as a precaution. Tomorrow, we'll need to take your official statements at the station. What happened to those men? Mr. Parker asked, his expression darkening. All three are in custody, Mike assured him. One was shot during the rescue but will survive to face charges. They won't hurt anyone else. Jamie, who had been quiet for a moment, suddenly spoke up. Officer Mike, will you come back tomorrow? I want to show you my police badge collection. Mike smiled warmly at the boy. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Jamie. As Mike turned to leave, Mrs. Parker touched his arm. Our family will never forget what you did tonight. You're a hero to us. Mike shook his head. The real hero is your son. In all my years as a police officer, I've never met a braver kid. He looked at Jamie with genuine admiration. That boy has the heart of a true hero. The courtroom was packed with people. Reporters sat in the back with their notebooks. Police officers in uniform stood along the walls. In the front row sat the Parker family, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, little Emma with her stuffed rabbit, and Jamie, wearing a neat blue shirt and tie. Mike Bennett sat beside Jamie. The boy had asked specifically for Mike to be next to him today. Over the past 6 months, they had formed a special bond. Mike had visited the Parker home many times, helped Jamie with his police badge collection, and even took him fishing at the lake. "Are you nervous?" Mike asked Jamie quietly. Jamie nodded. "A little. But Dad says telling the truth is never wrong." "Your dad is right," Mike smiled. "Just answer the questions honestly, like we practiced." Today was the final day of the trial against Vince Marshall and his gang. The evidence against them was strong. Police had found not only the counterfeiting equipment in the cabin, but also records of other crimes. The 3 men were facing charges of kidnapping, assault, counterfeiting, and attempted murder. The judge entered, and everyone stood. After she sat down, she called Jamie's name. "The court calls Jamie Parker to the stand." Jamie took a deep breath and walked to the front of the courtroom. His legs looked shaky, but his head was held high. After he was sworn in, the district attorney approached with a kind smile. "Jamie, can you tell the court what happened on the night of April 15th, when you and your family were camping?" Jamie looked at his family, then at Mike, who gave him an encouraging nod. Then he began to speak, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We were roasting marshmallows when 3 men came into our campsite with guns. They tied up my parents and made us go with them to a cabin. They kept asking my dad about bank codes and vault times." "And what happened next?" the attorney asked. Jamie described how he pretended to be asleep, then escaped through a bathroom window when no one was watching. He told about running through the dark forest, falling down hills, getting scratched by branches, but always continuing. "I remembered what my dad taught me about finding roads by going downhill, and I remembered my mom saying to always look for help from police officers if I'm in trouble." In the gallery, Mrs. Parker wiped tears from her eyes. Mr. Parker put his arm around her shoulders. "And then what happened, Jamie?" the attorney asked. "I saw headlights on the road. I ran as fast as I could and waved my arms. It was Officer Mike's car. When he stopped, I told him my family needed help." Jamie looked directly at Vince Marshall, who sat with his head down at the defense table. "Officer Mike believed me. He called for help, and they saved my family before those men could hurt them more." The questioning continued for another 20 minutes. The defense attorney tried to confuse Jamie on some details, but the boy remained clear and truthful. When he finally stepped down from the witness stand, the judge smiled at him. "Thank you, Jamie. You may return to your seat." As Jamie walked back, people in the courtroom began to clap softly. The judge didn't stop them. By the time Jamie reached his seat, the entire room was applauding. The boy blushed but stood straight as Mike patted his back proudly. Later that afternoon, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all charges. Vince Marshall and his men would be going to prison for a very long time. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around the Parker family. Chief Wilson announced that the department was giving Jamie a special Civilian Bravery Award, the youngest person ever to receive it. "This young man showed courage beyond his years," Chief Wilson said to the cameras. "He is an example to us all." As the crowd began to disperse, Mike knelt down to Jamie's level. "So, what do you think? Still want to be a police officer when you grow up?" Jamie nodded eagerly. "More than ever, I want to help people like you helped my family." Mike smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. "Well, I'd better stay in shape then. You'll make a great partner someday." As the Parker family walked toward their car, Jamie turned back to wave at Mike. The officer waved back, feeling a pride that went beyond his job. Sometimes the darkest nights brought out the brightest courage, and a child running out of the woods had reminded him why he wore the badge in the first place.